Have you ever wondered why you never quite fit in? Why the silence speaks louder to you than the noise ever could? Why certain rooms feel too loud for your spirit even when no one is speaking? There is something different about you, something you've carried since before you had words to describe it. A knowing, a burden, a light. You sense things others miss. The shift in the atmosphere before something happens. The ache behind someone's smile. The weight in a conversation no one else notices. And for most of your life, you've questioned yourself because of it. You've asked why you feel so much, why you dream in symbols, why you wake up with tears in your eyes as if your soul had been walking in another world while your body slept. People may call you too sensitive, too intense, too strange. But what if the truth is, you were never meant to live on the surface of things? What if your depth is not a flaw, but a fingerprint? A mark left by the one who formed you for something more, something sacred. Many who are chosen feel broken long before they feel called. Their childhood is heavy, their teenage years are quiet, and their adult life is filled with moments that cannot be explained by chance. The losses, the betrayals, the doors that should have opened but didn't. None of it was random. It was the shaping of a vessel that would one day carry light into darkness. The world sees your loneliness and calls it emptiness. But heaven sees it and calls it preparation. You were not left out, you were set apart. And the ache you carry is not evidence of abandonment. It is the echo of eternity pulling you into a purpose that cannot be rushed. In this video, we will step into that sacred ache. We will look into the hidden mystery behind why the chosen ones are so often lonely or broken. And we will uncover what heaven may be whispering through every tear, every delay, every silence you thought would never end. So, take a breath. Settle your heart, because what comes next is not just information, it is confirmation. And it may be the message your soul has waited a lifetime to hear, the sign of divine separation. There is a moment in every chosen life when the separation begins. It does not always come with thunder or lightning. Sometimes it starts in the quiet. A shift in conversations. A growing distance between you and the ones who once knew your name. You may not even recognize it at first, but heaven does. Because separation is the first sign of divine appointment. God never uses what he does not first extract. Look through the pages of Scripture and you will find this pattern etched like a divine law. Moses, born to Hebrew blood, raised in Pharaoh's house, but belonging to neither. Joseph, a dreamer among brothers, cast into a pit and sold into a place that would one day bow before him. David, anointed king, yet dismissed back to fields where no crown could be seen, each one separated, not because they were less, but because they were marked. This kind of separation is not a punishment. It is a carving, a removal from what is common to make room for what is holy. God pulls you from where you are comfortable because the environment that shaped you cannot sustain what he is planting inside you. The job you lost, the friendship that faded, the room where your presence no longer felt welcome. These are not signs of failure. They are signs of formation. Because you cannot carry the mantle of the called while anchored in places that demand your conformity. You were never meant to belong to the systems you were sent to transform, and so God sets you apart. Not in arrogance, not in isolation, but in consecration. The pain you feel in these moments is real, but it is not rejection, it is rearrangement. The wilderness is not exile, it is sanctuary. A place where voices fade so that only his remains. A place where dependence is stripped and identity is revealed. A place where the chosen are not destroyed but discovered. And once the separation has taken root, the next part begins. The breaking, the reshaping, the inner undoing that prepares you to carry what cannot be carried by the old version of you. the breaking that births identity. There comes a season in every chosen life where everything begins to unravel. Not because you have done something wrong, but because what once held you together can no longer hold what God is placing inside you. The breaking is not random, it is surgical. It reaches into the deep places of the soul and cracks open what was hidden. Not to expose you in shame, but to reveal you in truth. God breaks what He intends to rebuild in greater glory. You feel it in the silence after prayers that go unanswered. You feel it in the stillness after doors close that you thought were meant to open. You feel it in the ache of relationships that cannot carry the weight of who you are becoming. And you ask, why does it hurt like this? Why must the calling come with such sorrow? But the truth is, the breaking is not against you. It is the birth canal of your identity. Jeremiah knew it. Called from the womb, yet cursed the day he was born. His soul carried the burden of prophecy before his voice could find the words. He wept not because he lacked strength, but because he carried truth in a world allergic to it. Like him, you are not weeping without reason. Your sorrow is sacred. Your ache is a signal. You are not falling apart. You are being undone so that you can be remade. Clay must be crushed to be reshaped by the potter's hands. And so it is with you. The ego must crack. The wounds must rise. The false selves must dissolve. Only then can the blueprint of heaven emerge from beneath the dust. You thought you were breaking down, but you were breaking open. And when that opening occurs, when your soul no longer clings to what once defined you, you begin to emit a different kind of light. A spiritual frequency, one that draws and repels, one that makes others uncomfortable not because you are offensive, but because you are luminous. And that light begins to reveal the next mystery, the loneliness that comes not from emptiness but from radiance, the loneliness of light. There is a solitude known only to those who carry light, not the kind that flickers in times of joy, but the kind that remains steady in the dark. It is the ache of walking into a room and sensing what no one is saying. It is the silent burden of being the one who sees too much, feels too deeply, loves too purely. The world tells you to dim it, to tone it down, to be more normal. But your light was never meant to be adjusted. It was meant to be revealed. Light is beautiful, but it is also disruptive. It awakens, it exposes, it makes shadows tremble. And when you walk in that light, you don't just shine. You reveal. You become a mirror that others would rather avoid. Not because you condemn them, but because your presence forces their masks to slip. Your clarity disturbs their comfort. Your truth makes their illusions crumble. And so they distance themselves. Quietly, gradually, sometimes cruelly. Not because you are unworthy, but because you are uncontainable. Even Jesus, the light of the world, was not embraced by all. The scriptures say men loved darkness more than light because their deeds were evil. When light comes, it calls everything around it into account. That is what you carry, and that is why you are often left alone. But do not grieve the loneliness. It is not emptiness, it is refinement. God is teaching you to walk with Him in the absence of applause, to burn without needing validation, to carry revelation even when no one understands, because the moment is coming when your light will not just disturb, it will deliver. But first, it must deepen. And so, you are led into silence, into the dry, empty places where the world forgets you. But those are not dead places. They are holy ground, because it is in the wilderness, not the palace, that prophets are born. The wilderness where prophets are formed. The wilderness is not a mistake. It is not the consequence of failure. It is the chosen terrain of transformation. Every prophet walks through it. Every chosen soul is led into it, not by accident but by the Spirit. It is the place where everything unnecessary falls away, where voices fade, distractions die, and the voice of God becomes unmistakable. It is where your spirit is stripped of dependence until only faith remains. Elijah knew the wilderness. After calling down fire from heaven, he ran into the desert, laid beneath a broom tree, and asked to die. But God met him there, not in thunder, not in fire, but in a whisper. Because in the wilderness, God stops shouting, he starts whispering, and only those who are empty enough to listen can hear what he says. Jesus himself was led into the wilderness before he ever performed a miracle. Before the crowd, before the cross, came the desert. It was not a detour, it was preparation. In the silence of the wilderness, the soul learns what it truly is, not what people say, not what your past declared, but what the Spirit confirms in secret. You may feel like nothing is happening in this season, that your gifts are wasting, that your time is being lost. But heaven counts differently. In the wilderness, roots are going deep, not for show, but for strength. You are not being punished, you are being purified. Hidden, not because you are unworthy, but because what is growing in you is not ready to be seen. And when your soul finally begins to settle into that silence, when your heart surrenders to the stillness, you may think the war is over. But often, that is when it begins. Not around you, but within you. A war that every chosen one must face. The battle that comes before the breakthrough. The war before the calling. The battle begins long before the crown is placed, long before the mantle rests on your shoulders. For those who are chosen, opposition is not a sign of failure. It is the evidence of destiny. The enemy does not invest his resources in those who pose no threat. He pursues the ones marked to tear down his works. He strikes early, striking hard to weaken what heaven intends to release. Job was blameless, yet stripped of everything he loved. Not because he was forgotten, but because he was trusted. Esther was orphaned before she was crowned. Joseph was betrayed before he was exalted. Each one faced a season where it seemed as though the ground had vanished beneath their feet. And yet every loss became a step on the path toward fulfillment. The attacks may not always be visible to others. They come in waves of discouragement, in betrayals that pierce deeper than words, in spiritual heaviness that feels impossible to explain. You wake in the night sensing resistance in the air. You face barriers in places that once opened easily, and you wonder why the road seems harder for you than for others. It is because the weight of your future requires the strength of your endurance. The war before the calling is not to destroy you. It is to prepare your hands for the sword, your heart, for the crown, your mind, for the burden of leadership. It is here that your discernment sharpens. Here that your faith muscles grow. Here that you learn to walk when the path is unseen. Because when the day comes for you to stand in the place God prepared, you must be able to withstand storms without losing your ground. And so while the war rages, God waits. Not because he is absent, but because he is aligning everything for the right moment, which is why so many chosen ones feel the next great test. Not in the chaos of battle, but in the long, aching silence of delay. The delay that refines desire. There is a hidden weight in waiting that only the chosen understand. It is not the weight itself that wounds, but what it stirs in you. The questions, the doubts, the ache of seeing others rise while you remain in the shadows. You have the gift, you carry the fire. But the doors remain closed, the recognition delayed, the promise suspended like a star just out of reach. David knew this ache. Anointed as a boy, yet left to tend sheep while kings sat on thrones. He did not wear the crown until years after the oil had touched his head. In that gap, his character was forged. His intimacy with God was cultivated. The cave became his sanctuary. And the silence between the call and the coronation became the soil where desire was refined. Delay is not punishment. It is purification. God is not testing your potential. He is testing your hunger. Will you still worship in the waiting? Will you still believe when nothing changes? Will you still say yes when the yes seems far away? In the delay, distractions fall off. False ambitions dissolve. And what remains is pure. The applause fades. The ego dies. And desire becomes devotion. What you wanted for yourself is transformed into what God wants through you. The vision becomes less about platform and more about presence. Less about being seen and more about seeing clearly. Delay teaches you to let go of control and trust divine timing. It stretches your spirit, deepens your roots, and prepares your hands to carry what would have crushed you if it came too soon. It is not wasted time, it is sacred time, a gestation of glory, a womb of becoming. And when that refining work is complete, something happens. You begin to recognize yourself in the ancient stories, in the exile of Moses, in the rejection of Joseph, in the weeping of Jeremiah, and suddenly you realize you are not walking alone. You are walking a prophetic path worn by those who carried the weight of heaven before you. The prophetic mirror, seeing yourself in them. There comes a moment in the journey when the veil lifts, when you no longer see the stories of Scripture as distant history but as living reflections of your own hidden walk. You begin to notice the pattern, the rhythm, the sacred ache woven through every prophet, every chosen one who came before you. And in that recognition, something inside you breaks and heals at the same time. You see yourself in Moses, standing between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. Chosen but reluctant, called yet trembling. You feel his exile in your bones, his isolation mirrored in your own life, and his voice once doubted echoing in your silence. You see yourself in Joseph the dreamer, the one who spoke too soon, who saw too much, who paid for his vision with betrayal. You remember the pit, the years of being misunderstood, the prison of delay. And yet, like him, you know the dream never died, it only deepened. You see yourself in Jeremiah, who wept when others laughed, who carried the fire of truth but longed to run from it. You know the weight of being sensitive in a hardened world, the pain of feeling what others ignore, the burden of carrying a message you never asked for. And even in Jesus you find a sacred kinship, the rejection, the wilderness, the misunderstood miracles, the silence before the storm, not because you bear his divinity, but because you share in his loneliness. He too was set apart. He too bore light that was resisted. And like you, he walked paths that only the chosen must walk. This mirror is not there to glorify suffering. It is there to remind you that your journey is not a mistake, that your tears are not wasted, that your isolation is not evidence of abandonment, but of alignment. You are not inventing your story. You are remembering it. You are walking in the footsteps of those who carried divine fire through human frailty. And just like them, your breaking is giving birth to something eternal. This is the sacred tension we now enter. The mystery that asks not for your strength, but your surrender. The truth that whispers through every silent night and broken moment. You were never forgotten. You were being formed. There is a holiness in the hidden path, a grace that moves through the cracks of your loneliness, through the silence of unanswered prayers, through the weight you carry that no one else sees. Being chosen does not always feel like glory. It often feels like wilderness, like exile, like breaking. And yet somewhere within that ache, a sacred truth begins to rise. You were not born to fit in, you were born to illuminate. You were not created for comfort, you were shaped for calling. And every moment you thought was delay, every night you thought was emptiness, was God drawing you closer, deeper, inward. There is something in you that heaven remembers even when the world forgets. A mark, a fire, a signature that says you were set apart long before the pain ever found you. And now perhaps you are beginning to remember it too. the longing, the vision, the dreams that keep returning like waves you cannot outrun. Do not dismiss them. They are not illusions, they are invitations to become, to awaken, to return to what was written over your life before the foundation of the world. You are not too late, you are not too broken, you are not too far behind. Everything sacred is born in hiddenness, and you, chosen one, are still being formed in the hands of the potter. Trust the silence, trust the tension, trust the process that only makes sense in hindsight. If something in this journey stirred your spirit, I invite you to stay close. Like this video, share it with someone who may be walking the same lonely road, and subscribe to this channel if you feel called to walk deeper into these mysteries. But more than that, I invite you to speak. Share your story in the comments. What have you seen? What have you felt? What have you carried in silence that now wants to be spoken? You are not alone. This is a place for the called, the crushed, the awakening. This is a sanctuary for the chosen. Your path may be narrow, but it is not empty. And what waits for you beyond the breaking is not just restoration, it is revelation, peace and light to you. Keep walking.